So I'm just going to read a short section because I know there's a lot of readers tonight. This should take about 6 minutes. From kind of the middle of the book, and so if any of it doesn't make sense, you know, it would if you had read it. What are your issues with women? I'm talking to an editor from a large publishing house. She's offering to buy this book, but I don't think I can accept. I don't know, I say. I'd like to be in a relationship. That's not the impression I get. I know what she's saying. This is a memoir, by the way, but sometimes it's very aware of itself. I know what she's saying. The only answer I can imagine is that my desires override each other. My desire for a stable, loving relationship is canceled out by the urge to be hurt and humiliated. But even without these desires, I would have to develop the same skills as everybody else. I would have to learn how to trust, to commit, to enrich someone else's life. I would have to become consistent. The editor reminds me of a nurse who treated me the time I was found sleeping in a hallway with my wrist sliced open. "Why would you do that?" she asked. I didn't bother to reply. I was 14. She was blonde and pretty, her hair cut in a practical bob. I stared at her jaw and watched her throat move as she talked and taped my wound shut. I wanted to ask if she would take me home, to point out her hypocrisy, but I didn't. So I never knew whether she might have said yes. That was my first morning as a ward of the court. My trials went for years, as the state battled my father for custody. Family first was the official policy of the Department of Children and Family Services, and caseworkers would meet with me in small rooms asking if I wouldn't rather be with my dad. I was intransigent. Before the hearings, my father whispered to me outside the courtroom, "You killed your mother," something he still says in the notes he sends me. He wanted to provoke an outburst, so the judge, the social workers would see me out of control, but that didn't happen. I usually turned my rage inward. He was fighting on principle. He didn't like anybody pushing him around. There was no chance of me going home with him. I would have gone back to the streets instead. And I don't think he wanted me home. He had never reported me missing. Eventually, my father stopped showing up for the hearings. But before that, I asked him for his new address. And he said that I would find out where he lived in due time. And I did. An older friend drove me from Chicago's South Side into Evanston. We went up and down the street looking for my dad's town car. We found the Lincoln parked on a residential street in front of a 3-story house with big windows blasting light onto a porch with a broad swing and a full green lawn. The house was gigantic. Somewhere inside was my older sister, my stepmother, my new sister, only a year old. Later, my father and I would make up, and I would go in their kitchen and make sandwiches, even do my laundry. But I would never spend the night in that house. I was 15 years old. We were 2 blocks off the lake. If we listened, we might have heard the surf bubbling onto the sand. The beaches were semi-private. Residents were given tokens for admissions. Everybody else had to pay a fee. I sat with my friend for moments or minutes, pretending it was no big deal that I had just found my father's house. Unsure of my own feelings, even to this day. Unsure if I had killed my mother. It seems impossible. I wasn't even there when she died. I didn't see her that morning. I just got up and went to school on that day. Summer just over, my father waited in the convertible with the top down, parked in front of the entrance in the early afternoon as we screamed from the building. The sky was as clear and blue as it's ever been. I climbed in the passenger seat without saying anything. He was crying for himself, hoping I might help him with his pain. But I was indifferent to it and didn't love him yet. I hadn't known my mother was dying. Nobody had said anything about that. Her death was simple. No arrests were made. She just didn't wake up. Her skin was bleached from years spent out of the sun, and the blood sifted through her and settled on her side in one large, colorful bruise. Or so I was told. 18 months later, and my father had a new wife, a new child, and a new house. The house was nicer. The wife was healthier. The neighborhood was better. Did I want to go inside? I remember it perfectly. The vibrancy of the memory, the only testimony to the meaning of the discovery. I knew where my father lived again, and I knew where I lived, 20 miles away in a group home with 8 other boys. That particular group home was a very hard place, and I never wanted to go back there. It was spring, it was night, our pockets were filled with coins from robbing parking meters. I stepped outside and ran a key along the back door of my father's dark blue car, then we drove away. You tell me, I think, still holding the phone with the editor from the large publishing house, feeling the pressure of the nurse's thumb on my palm as she pulls the tape and my skin comes together, making for a cleaner scar. What is my problem with women? Tell me, and I'll believe you. Thanks.